Howdy BHRCers, you can find every episode of Why People on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcast content. On this Why People episode number 17, we'll talk to Adam Robitaille, the United States Human Resources Head and Global Human Resources Business Partner at MilliporeSigma. Adam's role and personality are super cool and really unique relative to some of our past guests, so stay tuned. All right. Welcome to Why People, a Boston HR Council production. For those new listeners, the BHRC is one of the largest HR and people executive communities in the world with just under 1,500 HR executive council members. Thrilled to be joined by co-founder of the BHRC and co-host of Why People, Paul Roberts.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning, everyone. Today's podcast promises to be a memorable one. Can't wait.
Awesome, Paul, and very excited to be joined by our guest today. Adam Robitaille is the United States Human Resources Head and Global Human Resources Business Partner at MilliporeSigma. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Very glad to be here. Welcome.
Yeah, so excited about the conversation, Adam. As I queued up in the intro, I think your role is really unique to some of the folks that we've had on in the past, and I think your personality is pretty unique too. I think you're a pretty cool and laid back guy, so really excited to kind of hear the full Adam Robitaille story. So I think, we chatted in the pre-call, Adam, that you've seen, a few of these, and we usually follow kind of the same cadence here. So if you wouldn't mind, could you just maybe start us off and tell us a little bit about your background relative to kind of how it geared you towards, or maybe how it didn't gear you towards a life in the HR executive role?
Yeah, happy to. So welcome to be here again. So my name is Adam Robitaille, as Sean said. So I grew up in southern New Hampshire. I was educated in New Hampshire and Mass. I went to Colby-Sawyer College and then went to Merrimack College. And I always had a strong work ethic. I wanted a job as soon as I could possibly work. I wanted to make my own money and buy my own things. And so I started working rather early in my career. So I think what got me into HR is kind of a funny story. So when I was at Merrimack College, I was an intern at an investment firm. And at Putnam Investments, I was working there, and I worked in the call center, and then got promoted to work in kind of the more elite broker group, and then eventually moved to support the Putnam family. And then finally, my last role there was really helping them build their new defined contribution business. So, these are companies enrolling in new 401k administrators. And so it was a very, very small team. It was me working with the managing director, had a very, very small team underneath me, supporting all the employee inbound calls. And what, really interested me was in working there, I'd be working with the VP of HR at the company or the director of benefits, helping with plan design and support. And in talking to them, many, many, many different clients, I really enjoyed helping people that are helping out the employees of the organization. And so that kind of led me to moving to working at Philips. I was at Putnam for quite some time. And then, Philips was looking for someone to lead an employee call center. And I had the call center experience, but not really the HR experience. So naturally, I applied for the job, got the job, and then really moved over to working at a company in HR, supporting the employees, but leveraging kind of that call center background. And that was really interesting. I've never looked back. I really enjoy it. So kind of got new where I am today.
That's interesting, Adam. And I know just, in being connected and friendly before the podcast, I knew that kind of your drive to getting into work was a big part of it. But I guess I didn't realize exactly where you started. And so I apologize if you shared this, but did anything in your undergrad studies or even into your, from Colby-Sawyer or Merrimack, was there anything relative to human resources per se that developed in your coursework, or was it more your first role introduced you to kind of that, that theme or that function within the business?
I think through various business courses and getting my degree, there was always roles where, you were starting up a company or running an organization, and there was challenges, right? And for some reason, I'd always gravitate towards, the HR person trying to serve people topics, right? Helping with, engagement, morale, retention, things of that nature. And I really didn't really know the tactics at that time. I have a degree in marketing, but I just gravitated towards that. And I think talking to people and really being one that is hopefully typically someone that is trusted in the organization and throughout my academic tenure as well, I think just knowing that, I started to really, really enjoy that. And I think the eye-opening piece was talking to these HR leaders working at Putnam really is what, you know what, maybe I should investigate that sort of area. And so when I was looking for a job or my next career move, I was looking at various roles: generalist, business partners, benefits roles, compensation roles, recruitment roles. And I really enjoyed it. You could tell, a good recruiter works typically in HR and they are selling why you should join that company. And I really liked that advocacy for showing, I work in HR, I support the employees and the managers of the company. I also support the company. I really created kind of a passion for doing so.
I'm just glad we solved the mystery as to why you're so chill and laid back. You're a Southern New Hampshire native. That makes sense.
You got it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I didn't know the call center background. I didn't realize that was something that you were a part of super early on in your career. Tell us a little bit about that, because call center's unique. A lot of call centers have kind of gone away or have changed relative to technology and how folks are able to support other folks, whether it's externally or internally. But some still are around today, and some businesses can't function without them. Tell us a little bit about how that experience maybe helped shape you, and I have to imagine there was part of it that you had no idea, going into what that was going to feel like. Like, tell us a little bit about, early Adam Robitaille in that spot.
It's funny because the call center experience is really what I think tipped me over to be the final candidate for my first HR job. But, one common trait that happens when working in a call center versus working in HR is, you've got your day planned out. You've got, scripts, you've got knowledge-based articles, whatever it may be. You've got resources at your fingertips to help out whoever may need your help. In a call center, that phone rings, you get a beep on your headset, and it could be a very well-planned interaction or maybe go complete sideways, and you got to kind of figure out while you're on the call what the answer would be. That's kind of like a day in HR. I mean, you think you're all planned out, ready to go, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this happened or that happened, or you got an emergency here. So having that ability to really react to sensitive needs with, while you're kind of on the fly is very, very much relatable. And I think when I started at my first organization in HR, they were building up, and I've got some expertise here, they were building up a regional and a local hub, right? So I've done anything from building up a call center to support employees in the U.S. with the call center in the U.S. to, transforming work and starting a call center, outside of the U.S. to support U.S. employees in a mix of the both. And I've done a lot of that at both organizations. And that's one of the reasons why I think MilliporeSigma reached out to me to come work here as well, because they were kind of going through an HR transformation and trying to leverage shared services as much as possible to really kind of have a more tiered HR model. And I think just having that call center experience and having that understanding of technology and service delivery really made them, reach out to me and have a good conversation.
And that's cool. And I just want to make sure I'm tracking here right, Adam. The call center at Putnam, were you and your team fielding customer calls or internal Putnam calls, a little of both? Like, what was the...
A little of both. So, every intern there, at least they did, right? You supported any shareholder of Putnam, right? Any mutual fund shareholder that Putnam sold. So you may have a total account balance of $5. You may have several millions of dollars. It depends on what you have. But you all start with the basics on, how to be a proper call center rep, how to leverage technology. And I worked my way through the organization where I moved to a group where you went from supporting customers and brokers to supporting, the more elite broker population, then moving them to supporting, Putnam family members. And then my last move was supporting employees of companies and their 401k support. So really, almost all different client groups are supported there. And I think doing that diverse kind of rotation, if you want to call it, of supporting them, I've learned so much on, how to react in certain situations, what others may want over other individuals. And so the learning was really great there as well.
Yeah. And I think important to note, and again, pros and cons and all call centers are different, but I'd have to imagine, I've never worked in the call center before, but personal finances, wealth management, that's some emotional stuff. That's not an inbound call center for, a high-powered vacuum. This is conversations that have some emotional charge to it, and I have to imagine that requires a different level of approach. I mean, is that fair to say, Al?
Totally. Again, just like working in HR. I mean, we have tough conversations, right? That happened in both areas. And I think, having the ability or the skill to really, help digest someone or calm someone down or reiterate in a different way so you're understanding on the same playing field, that's very, very important.
And we usually try to stay cadence-wise, on the same path there. But I got to ask this question, Adam, and
yeah.
I promise, not to dig in too deep here, but I'm curious. So with somebody with your call center background, that's how you kind of broke into business, right? Of course, there's a whole bunch of chatter around generative AI and how that technology is solving for a lot of call center functions or call center workflow. In 30 seconds, give us your pitch for and against. Like, is it all or none? Is it a little bit, like, just curious on someone like yourself where you fall on it?
Yeah, I think it's drastically changed. I mean, leveraging, so you dial into a phone number, right? You dial into a telephony program of some sort, right? So leveraging prompts to answer questions helps make things more cost effective and efficient for the customer, but also having keywords and language tie into a phone call where you can leverage knowledge-based articles on demand as the person's talking to make the AI even faster, or perhaps leverage a chat more to prevent and do less phone calls. Really, that has come a long way since I first started back in whatever that year was. But it can be very, very helpful. But as said earlier, when the conversations go as planned and they're more canned discussions with canned questions and answers, it can work very, very well. When you get a very, emotional topic or dynamic, it's very difficult to make sure you're persuading the conversation in the right way, just leveraging AI as one tool to use.
Yeah. Kind of spot on, right? I mean, I think anyone you chat with says it's certainly a tool that's going to help. It's not a replacement by any means.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, Adam, so thanks for kind of giving us that foundational component of the conversation. And it's interesting, right? It seems like almost all of your peers, everyone we talk to, relative to their start in HR and people, has some type of, call it a superpower relative to the ever-widening HR and people spectrum. And then they've had to build out the rest of their skill set around that, relative to their pathway into the executive or leadership roles. As I hear your kind of background, I'm trying to think what that superpower is. Is it truly, business partner in the truest sense? Because that's kind of where you started in that call center. Is it employee relations? What would you say kind of your background kind of rooted you in relative to the traditional HR and people spectrum that we see it today?
Yeah, I think, I had a couple of key mentors early on in my career. And I think, with their support and their push, in addition to me, for any project or initiative, I'd raise my hand. I wanted to be a sponge to learn whatever I can. I wasn't coming from HR. I wanted to learn as much as possible, as fast as possible. So, I raised my hand for anything. And I think where I really enjoy working and I'm very comfortable, and I believe the company also benefits from this, is, I really like transformational HR work. I love helping implement new HR models. I love working on M&A deals and integrating organizations or divesting organizations. I also have, a bit of a niche on just shared services in general and making sure you have a model where you keep your employees happy, but at the same time, you can do things in a financially effective way. So you're supporting the businesses on both ends of the spectrum. That's where I think I really succeed. And I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick M&A. I can quickly adapt and connect with individuals and then hopefully bring them through the finish line as well to integrate an organization, which when you're doing multiple transactions per year, that's found to be very, very beneficial, of course. But that's where I think I really personally enjoy and believe the business also benefits from that.
Yeah. That's really cool to hear, and I imagine it's very helpful in your current role, which we'll get to a little bit later in the conversation. So again, thanks for kind of rooting us here, and you brought us up to your journey into Philips. So I guess I'll just stop here and say, hey, tell us a little bit about, okay, you're getting into HR now. At what point during in the work that you were doing did you say, hey, I really like this, right? This HR stuff, and you thought, hey, leadership or a career progression is something that's of interest to me. Like at what point did you get in and say this work excites me and I'd like to do it more and maybe help more people out at a certain level?
I knew pretty much right away. I mean, I joined the company as they were building up a new shared services model, right? So they were breaking down blended HR within their respective business units and trying to centralize into a more of a shared service hub with some, call them legacy COEs, right? And I was very, very comfortable working with the leaders of HR in doing so. And my original job was come in and create an employee service center for U.S. employees. So let's make sure employees, when they need help, they can go onto our portal, they can make a phone call, and get whatever HR question they have answered. And they went really, really smooth. And I'm always the person that's like towards the end of completion of a project, I'm raising my hand for the next. So, as that was happening, I raised my hand to say, hey, I got a lot of accolades in doing this for the US. Do we need help at any of the other hubs, whether it be Amsterdam, Shanghai, Poland, other areas of the world? And everyone said yes. I kind of helped out every hub start up and build. And then I expanded the US hub to become kind of an America's hub for the organization. And that was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun and energizing. And I said, you know what? I don't want to get siloed to being kind of the call center person. I want to broaden the HR knowledge. So I raised my hand to help at the time also support kind of our HRIS data entry and our payroll team. And my role was kind of expanded. I kept the previous role and they expanded my job under that leadership of one of my previous mentors. And that happened. It went really well. And then the company, Philips, decided to disentangle the lighting organization with the healthcare organization. I said, you know what? People are nervous, but this could be a chance for opportunity. So I'll raise my hand. I'll do anything. I'm open to it. So my boss stayed with Philips, the health tech organization of Philips, leading all of people operations. I raised my hand to help build that for the lighting organization. And so I not only was a key member of disentangling, a large organization, but I'm helping build that for the lighting division as well. And there was various other components of HRIS, benefit operations, fleet management, and a few other core areas of HR as well. I had a ton of fun doing that. As that kind of, dust settled a bit, the next was to really evaluate our HR model, right? To think through, are there any other opportunities here to really drive some additional efficiencies? And so working with my leader, we thought through, maybe we can centralize some, what I would call HR advisory work. A business partner should be partnering with leaders with the business to support various initiatives, capabilities, things of that nature. But for certain inquiries, we could centralize some of that work. So we centralized some HR advisory work into the operations team to drive some efficiencies there as well. And it went very, very well. I had a lot of visibility with the CHRO and my boss, of course, and it went really, really well. And that was when someone called me about an opportunity here at MilliporeSigma. And like most phone calls, I'm super happy, I'm all set, no need to chat further. And then, 30 days later, the person calls me back and maybe I had a bad day, and I said, sure, I'll meet for coffee. So I meet for coffee. Long story short, I ended up leaving Philips and joined this organization. And I joined this organization knowing that they had most of their HR operations work already solely in the US. And we wanted to kind of, revitalize that and try to harmonize some work as we built a huge global hub in the Philippines. So I came in, did some evaluation, and we shifted some work there as well. That went well. Got some accolades there, some visibility to senior leadership as well. We bought a company at that time, a larger company. I raised my hand. We implemented a new success factors module, really bringing forward employee and manager self-service. I was involved in that. And then we decided to reorg HR and implement more of a country-based model. Raised my hand, applied for a job, got the job, and led. The last time we talked, I was leading the country-based HR organization, which was, DE&I, compensation, benefits, recruiting, learning and development, employee relations. I think that's it for all three of our sectors for the US and Canada. With that role, I also maintained a seat on what we call our US Country Council, which is a leadership team providing guidance to the entire country, regardless of the sector the person is in. Did that, and then of course the pandemic, that was interesting. I think, I've learned a lot in that pandemic. I mean, being head of HR for the US, priority country for the organization, and then going to pandemic, that was intense and insane, but learned a ton and really made some really solid relationships in doing so. And then a little over a year ago, we decided to change our model again. At that time, I was thinking through what my next steps are, and I really wanted to be a senior business partner with a large team supporting a senior leader in the company. So I raised my hand, I applied for a job, and I became the job that I am now, which is I maintained the US HR role, but I became the business partner to the operations organization of the life science business. It's about 13,000 employees globally, and we are manufacturing all of our products and services for life science across, the X number of sites across the globe. And that's where I am now.
That's pretty amazing, Adam. Yeah, I just jotted some things down, and it's funny when Paul and I decided to start the podcast. We had a little bit of pressure from, I'd say, 40 or 50 of our closest buddies within the BHRC that said, hey, a podcast would be pretty cool here. We didn't really know who our audience would be, right? We knew HR executive peers would tune in, but we didn't realize that all kinds of folks would tune in, right? I mean, there's finance folks, there's operations folks, there's people in college considering human resources. So just to, real quickly, I think folks heard Adam talk a little bit there about a whole bunch of different operational models, right? And just to help folks that might be earlier on in kind of their understanding of some of this, really just talking about how organizations decide to deploy their HR resources to the organization in whole. And when Adam talks about shared services, organizations, whether they're split out by business units, whether they're split out by geographical differences, whether it's both, a lot of times we'll decide from an efficiency standpoint, it makes sense to build these centers where all different business units or locations can access the human resources needs, right? It's a, decentralized versus centralized, that kind of conversation. So the question I have, Adam, is, and you say it pretty passively, but you raised your hand a lot. And I think that there's something to that, right? Every single person we've had on the show to this point has talked about some type, and everyone obviously discusses it differently, some type of business curiosity is what led them to kind of what was next or furthered their career, right? They didn't necessarily sit around and wait for someone to say, hey, Adam, you're the perfect person for this role, right? It was kind of a lot of, for those people just listening, I got my finger on my nose right now, right? Like who's going to be the person to lead this? So could you tell us a little bit about the thought process around raising your hand in some of these situations? Like, was it immediate? Did you have to say, geez, I've never done this before. Will I succeed? Like, how'd you think about some of these different hand-raising spots?
I think, I've got quite a few mentees that I support, and I tell them, you're in the driver's seat of your career's progression. And sometimes you may, have the opportunity to kind of fall in your lap and be asked to take a role, but that's not always the case. And I think building social capital is incredibly important in an organization. And you do that by building up your network, getting involved, asking questions, becoming a resource, and really trying to shape kind of a one HR mindset across the colleagues in the organization. As you do that, it becomes easier and easier. And believe it or not, as your social capital increases, you may be asked more than often, hey, what's your thoughts on this? Or have you ever experienced this? And get more comfortable with, saying, I don't know. I'm happy to get involved with you to help figure this out, but I don't know. And that was my biggest concern when I first started in HR. I had to be comfortable saying, I don't know, but I'll figure, I know who to call, and I'll figure this out. And I think building that up has made me successful. And I'd give that advice to anyone that ever asked in doing so, because that's where you learn more by on the job doing something than actually reading a book, an article, going to a course. Those are all also complementary and helpful as well, but you learn it by doing it. And I think it's by doing, and I'll never forget, my first M&A deal. I was so excited, but I was so nervous. And now, I'm much more comfortable in doing so, but, it takes time, right? And if you go through it and you leverage your peers and you ask for help and guidance, do it as more of a team versus an individual, it gets easier and easier.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Adam. Like you and I have never worked together formally, but when you talk about social capital, right? It's interesting. I'm just curious. We started this conversation with you saying, I've always had this high level of work ethic, and shoot, the first 10 minutes was you basically saying I just kind of jumped in and started, rowing, right? For lack of a better term, like I just started doing the work. And again, personal branding, I don't want to go flying down a rabbit hole here, but I get the sense that you're someone, talking about your own career, I get the sense that you're someone that's pretty easy to approach when there's an issue that maybe I might know that you don't necessarily know the answer, but it seems like you have kind of the will to jump in and find out the answer or pull the resources together to make something happen. Is there something to that? You said you started getting asked the question, like, what are your thoughts on this? And then you said, well, I was also comfortable saying I'm not sure, but kind of let me dig in. Is there something to that, kind of developing your brand as a teammate that's willing to do that work?
Yeah, I tell my team all the time, if one thing in HR fails, whether it be payroll or recruiting or whatever, the business doesn't care. They're going to say HR is failing. So you need to make sure you're all rowing in the same direction and rowing as a team, not an individual. Individuals rowing by themselves are going to get you nowhere, right? So I think this is where get comfortable with saying, I'm really good at that and I can help you, or I've got no idea, but I've got some bandwidth and I can do so. I mean, just make that known, and it creates a culture of everyone wanting to help everyone. And it makes going through more difficult times easier, right? It's stressful, but I think it creates that culture of more of a team dynamic than an individual. And that lessens the pressure on individuals when our businesses are really demanding, like right now, for an example, right? So I think having that has been helpful. And once you do it the first couple of times, it gets easier. And you'll be surprised at how fast you create that change of a community versus an individual working in HR.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of appreciate you kind of leaning in there, Adam. And then kind of one more question relative to, present time, and then, excited to finish the conversation with kind of the future and your thoughts on it. But your current role is really unique in the sense that it's kind of two different hats, right? You're leading US HR, and then you're a business partner to the global operations. Can you talk a little bit about those two different hats and kind of where they meet and how you approach that role?
Yeah. So, the US head role is making sure we have a sense of HR community in the organization. How HR supports a business, the majority of the time, should never really differ. There'll be some finesse and fine tuning based upon the sector or what's happening at a site, of course, right? But the overarching approach to what HR should and shouldn't be doing should be really consistent. And that role that I have is really helping making sure at the most senior level, we're aligned there. When there's new policies together, let's create harmonized policies. So as we promote, cross-pollination from sector to sector, the employee experience is as consistent as possible. That's kind of one role that I play. At the same time, we've got a very heavy operations workforce in the U.S. I mentioned there's about 13,000 employees. A little less than half of them are based in the U.S. And we've got a big footprint in Europe and in APAC as well. That role is more working closely with the most senior leader in making sure from a people strategy perspective, the team and I are supporting our leaders and our employees to drive through some of those people initiatives. So much closer than in the U.S. country role as an example, and leveraging my team and the leader that I support and making sure, we're leveraging engagement surveys or we're leveraging data from insights from other surveys we've taken with the employees to really make sure we're looking at talent, development, retention, more specifically within that respective business unit. But again, it's a lot of times pulling through the book of what HR can and can't do, but making it more specific for that respective business unit.
It's really cool, and appreciate you giving us a little background into the role or the two roles. Well, we'd love to kind of end the conversation now, and this has been a blast. Love to end it kind of rooted in thoughts about the future. So I guess I'll just start with more specific to yourself. How are you thinking about HR in general and HR leadership, moving into the future, just from on a personal level?
I think, one thing I'm pushing for and trying to be creative is I want to make sure we're modernizing employee development, right? We have traditional classrooms, we've got virtual opportunity as well, but I want to make sure from a learning and development, from an employee development, which, helps the retention and resiliency and other skills there that are really important. I want to make sure we are becoming as modern as possible and making it relevant to all levels in the organization. I've got a soft spot for manufacturing because I've come from a manufacturing role right now, as did Philips, and I want to make sure, we're not just leveraging email for communications or leveraging classroom trainings. There's other components of AI or other technologies available to make sure employees at all levels feel like, regardless of their role in the company, they also have ways to develop. And I think making that clear with the business and fine-tuning it or tailoring it to the audience is something that I want to be really, really cautious of now in the years to come as well.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think there's enough data out there now, especially coming out of the pandemic, right? The old favorites from an employee value proposition, right? Compensation and benefits, those always kind of led the day, but geez, there's enough data out there now saying, hey, those obviously are important, but folks want to know how they're able to better themselves and better their careers within an organization. That's kind of driving the conversation now. So I think you're spot on there, Adam.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll put you on the spot here. L&D, is it a total reward? Is it more of a culture thing that should be, threaded throughout an organization? How do you think about L&D relative to where it fits, I guess?
I'll expand this more than just L&D, but L&D is a good topic to discuss. HR should do a really good job providing tools and frames on policies, procedures, processes, and things that are HR related. But we need to make it easy for the business to understand in a way where they can become enablers and ambassadors of this. When you do things where HR is driving it, when it's really not an HR topic like development, we need to have a comfort where our managers are comfortable to have dialogues with our employees to understand, what are you looking to do? Let's make sure sideways promotions are also, as successful as an up and down promotion, as an example. And we need the business, it should be leaders, the ones having these dialogues, not HR coming in to do so. So I'm always pushing to make sure HR is available to tailor and make the right frame for various topics, but it needs to be embedded in the business for it to really be successful, digested, and actually effective to come through the organization as well.
Well, that makes sense. And then staying in the future here, Adam, but kind of shifting towards more of, thinking of folks that are entering the workforce or entering the HR profession. Any tidbits of advice for maybe somebody who's just jumping into HR, or maybe someone who's been there for a couple of years that's looking to advance into the profession?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I tell everyone, raise your hand and don't be afraid to make a change just to learn. It may not be the ideal next role, but if you can learn from it, it's going to make you even more well-rounded for, a future step, right? And sometimes that means making a horizontal move, like I said before. But that's okay. You're still learning. Never stop learning. Raise your hand. Get yourself into uncomfortable situations where you can learn from that and expand your breadth of knowledge. And by doing so, you'll find out that it will help you down the road because you've got more experience in doing so. So raise your hand, get involved in initiatives, get out of your comfort zone, ask for help when needed, and really help improve your social capital.
And you're not just telling everyone to jump into a call center right out of college, right?
That's not what I'm saying. Exactly.
Well, Adam, thank you very much. This has been a really cool conversation. You're a great, Boston HR Council member, but appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Adam.
We'll see you.